Hello, my name is Emma Viles. I'm a Spanish activist based in Barcelona, and I want to share with you today a bit of the collective knowledge, the common body of practices that have been created and built by our people, by the Spanish 15M Indignados movement that burst out in 2011. But I also want to frame this in the context we are living in, and also tell you a bit about what other things are happening around the world and what are our practices regarding the internet and social networks. You might recognize this image. This is La Plaza del Sol in Madrid, the capital city of Spain, which was full with thousands and thousands of people for nearly a month. But not only the capital, many cities around the country were filled with people as well, which actually gathered to talk about the situation, to find solutions together, to build proposals, and to just have a collective catharsis of not being by ourselves, no? Seeing that there are more people around us that do want to make and share change, no? So this was 2011. And then it jumped over across the Atlantic into the United States, and the Occupy movement burst out. The Occupy movement was fueled, and actually knowledge was shared from Spain to United States, and it was like the continuation of the Spanish 15M Indignados movement, which then also spread to many other Western countries around the world and a few others. You may well know what Occupy movement was saying. We are the 99% in front of the 1% with power, that is, and money, which is actually creating a very unfair world for the rest of us and the environment. But there were many, many, many other things happening, no? Which not always mainstream media or the television tells us about. We had, at the same time as we were on the high peak of moving, we had Greece as well. This is an image of the central square in Athens. We also had things that preceded us, like this is an image of Iceland, no, that was also really strong on moving and claiming the responsibility of banks and politicians for the financial crisis that burst out in 2008, which was actually one of the elements that fueled all of these protests around the world. But also back in 2010, we had what is known as the Arab Spring, the north of Africa, countries like Egypt, Tunisia, and others that were actually swelling out into the streets, asking for a more just political structure, other than, in many cases, dictatorships, and many other issues as well, of course. And then there were many other movements that actually came after our peak of movement, no? In Spain, this is an image of Yo Soy 132 in Mexico, which was a movement that actually burst out from the university. A year later, I think this was around 2014, we had the Sunflower Movement, for example, in Taiwan. Many other things were also happening through Asia. And then it jumped back into Turkey with the Gezi Park movement, trying to defend the right to the city, to public space, the commons, a park with trees that were going to cut down for a big shopping mall. And then recently, 2016, we had the Nuit Debout movement, or we are having right now as well in France, the Gilets Jaunes movement. So all these things were happening, have been happening around the world since the 2008 crisis, which have also, of course, rooted experiences in past movements. For example, in our case, we have learned a lot from South American movements, no? But what is quite specific to this last wave of movements is that they are all using the internet and the tools the internet gives us as a space for organizing, coordinating, and communicating. Another issue is that many times mainstream media is trying to tell the story to the world that nothing is happening, that there is not this social protest and desire to change the world. And one of the things the internet has given us is a big access to information so we can be informed. There's one specific slogan that says, the revolution will not be televised, it will be live tweeted. And this is very much true in many cases, no? Like we had the case in Turkey when there were all these protests on the street, and what the television was broadcasting was a documentary of penguins, no? But all the world knew because we had all these people communicating through social media telling us what was happening there, no? So this has been a very important tool, the internet, for these new movements. And it is also inserted in a time of history and society where we talk about the network society now, because the internet has changed the way we act, the way we relate to each other, the way we find information, and the way we organize. And we are no longer passive consumers of information in front of a TV or in front of a radio. We actually want to search ourselves, look for the information ourselves, exchange ideas with other people, debate, interact, say what we believe and think. And this has actually meant a lot to the shaping of movements over the past, let's say, decade. And this is a reality. This is a tool we have here that we have to learn how to use it properly, to use it with security and looking after not only of ourselves but of others we organize with. And what I want to share with you also is what are these common ways of using these tools that have been exchanged. This knowledge has been exchanged and shared by different groups. So before we jumped into a more detailed introduction of how we organize through the internet, I just wanted to give you this definition of what we call technopolitics, no? Which is a name given to how organized civil society does politics, because politics is not only something that politicians do, it's something that is in our lives, and that we ourselves are doing politics when we are trying and aiming for social and political transformation. So the final aim, of course, in many cases is this transformation of society, and also empowerment of society, which is all the more emotional part, that we need to be connected, we need to be empowered and feel the strength of each other in order to have the courage and want to do things with others and try to change, no? So there has been like a series of strategies that have been developed or adapted over the last years by new network social movements, and it has very much to do with what I explained before, that we are no longer campaigners that are asking others to follow as passive followers, but we are actually proposing others to do things with us and become active members of this transformation. No? Collective intelligence is very important as well. We all have our own special things we know how to do. This has to be made flourish in a group and put into use by the collective. No. Sometimes also what groups used to do a lot was things that they liked doing, like going on a demo, taking photos themselves, just showing how good campaigners they were themselves to their endogamic circle. This is something that new social movements tend to reject. We have to really do things that we can win and that are meaningful. It's not about us as campaigners, but about what we can do to change things. And the best thing of all is that this is very, very fun. It's a lot of fun, no? And also when you're building your strategies, and this of course is also used in the past, is really identify your common enemies and what your targets, what are you aiming for in order to be able to achieve these won battles along the way, no? And not try to preach to others. Like people really have to step in and believe that our proposal is an interesting proposal. It's not about trying to lecture them or convince them. And last and not least is seeking empowerment. Like if we are not having a fun movement, a movement that cares about each other, a movement that is proposing and actually winning small battles along the way, it is not going to be empowering and it's not going to have a long time span. So having all this in mind, I also wanted to talk to you a bit about the different structures movements can have. No, we have big movements that act like herd movements, where many people are involved. No, like we have the housing movement here in Spain, which is really strong, with over 1,000 groups around the country, and which are able to be in movement and active all the time. But we also have smaller groups that might be made up of 5-10 people, which are called the catalyst groups. And these are very important as well, because being smaller groups, you can work together easier, move faster, and be much more incisive with some more complex strategies you might want to deploy. For example, we have here in Spain 15M para rato, which is a small catalyst group that has led a legal process to take the bankers and politicians we considered responsible for the crisis to jail, and it is being very effective. Actually, right now, many of them, over 60 of them, have gone into jail, and it's a big and ongoing process. So we will have more battles won on this arena as well. No. Another very important issue is to personalize, that we shouldn't do, is to personalize a struggle, no? Because then we are selling the story that the media loves, that there's just one hero that can save us all. And it's not about that. It's about all of us acting and working together, that has like a real long-term impact and bigger potential of transformation that just this one hero we all wait for to come and save us. No, this is an example of a Alternativa movement in France, which managed to get their actions into a very well-known magazine, but the magazine sold it as this one-man white man that managed to make this revolution, invisibilizing the work of the many people that were actually behind this movement. This is the image of the 15M para rato catalyst group I talked to you about before. And another very interesting thing about this group is that it was anonymous. Like the media, the powers didn't know who was behind this group, and this is very powerful, because when they don't know how many of you are behind, in this case, for example, it was a bunch of 10 people. They imagine that they could imagine that they are many, especially if the proposal gathers strength and momentum, no? And if you, one of the hashtags used, for example, was La ciudadanía lo hizo. The citizens did it. So this movement, this proposal was actually saying that we are a citizen platform, and it's the citizens that are winning the battle against corruption. This is a very, very powerful message. And how we look after communication, how we look after the image we portray to the powers and to the people is very, very important. And we will see more about this in the next webinar. And the creation of our collective identity is really important as well. Like, we really have to understand and analyze who are we trying to talk to, what these people might be looking for, what might inspire them and empower them, and what is an identity that can be open enough to let all these collaborators and colleagues in. No? This is an example of the first drafts of the 2016 Nuit Debout movement, which had a big mixture of all these past left connotations. And the initial call was to the convergence of struggles. But of course, this was only appealing struggles already created, which at the time were very, very few in France. So the new proposal went into something that was much, much more open, without these past connotations, because it wanted to overflow and become a bigger citizen movement. So this is why a more distilled option of the identity was used to build all the communication strategy upon. And it also had very interesting elements of virality and declination. Nuit debout means night standing. And it also has an element of dignity, of standing. And it actually worked very well. Like, it in just over 24 hours, it managed to fill all the squares around France with people. And of course, a very important element as well is how we organize and what are the best structures to organize in order to be effective. The internet and also many social movements use the 1990 rule, when a small group of 1% people work and do like this big, heaviest part of the work, and share that with the closest 9%, which are their close collaborators, to help them amplify the actions to be able to reach the rest of society, which would be in the 90%. And also collaborating with other movements or other groups in your countries as a distributed network, where everyone is connected, even though everyone is covering different issues, but everyone can be able to communicate and help each other out when there are specific strategical moments for such and such a group. Also, if one of the nodes falls or is attacked or disappears, there's no problem there, because this is the big network that will reconnect itself through other means, instead of depending on the old, more centralized model where this thinking central node would give orders to the rest, and if something happened to this central node, it would all collapse. So these are like the two elements, distributed networks and the 1990 rule, that are really, really interesting to have in mind when you're actually organizing your group to be able to develop your ideas and proposals. So this was like the first like overview intro to social networks, social movements of the last past wave. I hope you join us for the next webinar, which will go more into detail with the tools we use and social networks and communication, of course. Thank you very much.